Something was wrong the moment the palace lights flickered on at 2:07 a.m. It wasn't just unusual, it was unheard of. Buckingham Palace does not wake early. It does not light up windows in the middle of the night. It does not send staff running in hushed panic unless something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. And tonight, something did. Because just minutes later, a chilling late-night statement hit every media outlet across the world. Prince William has been placed under intensive observation after a sudden health scare. No explanation, no reassurance, no follow-up. Just those words, cold, clinical, and terrifying in their silence. And then the line that froze millions of people in their tracks. Further details will not be released at this time, as the matter is deeply personal. Deeply personal. What does that even mean when the person in danger is the future King of England? Why would the palace hide the most critical information about the man destined to rule a 1,000-year monarchy? And more importantly, why now? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You could feel the tremors across the country. Phones buzzing at midnight. News presenters stumbling over their words. Royal correspondents looking pale, whispering into their microphones that this was highly unusual. Because the palace doesn't speak in riddles. The palace doesn't release statements at almost 3 a.m. The palace doesn't use phrases like intensive observation. Those words are reserved for situations where doctors are not just monitoring, they are worried. And the public felt it instantly. Was this a collapse? A medical emergency? A long-hidden condition? A sudden incident? Something else entirely? Every possibility began racing through people's minds as the palace refused to say a single thing more. And in that silence, that massive, suffocating silence, the fear only grew. Let me ask you something directly. When was the last time you saw Buckingham Palace this quiet and this defensive? When was the last time the future king disappeared from the public eye for hours with no explanation? When was the last time so many reporters confirmed that senior aides are unreachable? It doesn't happen. It simply doesn't. And yet tonight, it happened all at once, like a curtain being yanked shut on a stage where the audience wasn't supposed to see what was really happening behind it. What does that tell you? Could it mean this situation is far more alarming than the palace wants to admit? Or does it point to something deeper, something they've been hiding for weeks, maybe even months? And here's where the story gets even more unsettling. Tonight's emergency statement didn't include King Charles's signature. Traditionally, when a senior royal faces a serious medical incident, especially in air, the monarch signs or approves the public communication. It maintains authority, stability, reassurance. That's how it's always done. But this time, nothing. No signature. No royal approval stamp. No clarifying follow-up. Just a blunt, sterile message released with unusual speed, and then total silence. Why would the palace bypass the king in a moment like this? Was the situation too urgent? Was the king emotionally overwhelmed? Or was he not even informed before the release went out? Think about that. Think about the implications. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, about this night matches the royal rulebook. And the timing is chilling. For weeks, observers have noticed something subtle but undeniable about Prince William. He looked tired, not just exhausted from work. Drained, hollowed out, distracted, forgetful. There were moments on camera where he seemed physically present but mentally miles away. He canceled 2 minor appearances. He took a sudden private day that royal reporters quietly whispered about. And yet the palace repeatedly insisted he was in excellent health. They insisted everything was fine. They insisted there was no cause for concern. Well, clearly, something wasn't fine. Clearly, someone was concerned. Because tonight's emergency statement didn't come from nowhere. Something happened. Something urgent. Something serious enough to send one of the world's most heavily protected men under immediate medical supervision. The silence around Kate only makes the picture stranger. Where is she? Normally, the palace confirms when the Princess of Wales is by William's side during personal or medical matters. It calms the public. It shows stability. It signals unity. But tonight? The palace refused to answer. Repeatedly. Are we supposed to believe she isn't with him? Or are they hiding her location because it reveals something they don't want the world to know? Was she rushed somewhere privately? Was she already with him before the statement went out? Or is there more going on between the couple than the public has been told? The lack of clarity only fuels the concern, and the unanswered questions pile up like bricks in a collapsing wall. Reporters stationed outside the palace noticed another detail: the staff. Not the senior aides who usually handle crises, the junior ones. Pale-faced, tight-lipped, moving quickly but not speaking. Royal staff are trained to remain stone-cold in emergencies. But tonight their eyes told a different story. One reporter described the atmosphere as deeply unsettling. Another said it felt like something historic, but not in a good way. Think about that. When the people closest to the heart of the monarchy begin showing fear, you know something's wrong. Something big. Something they're struggling to manage or even understand. And then there were the whispers. Whispers that started around midnight and quickly spread to every royal desk in London. Aides were overheard saying things like, "It happened suddenly. He wasn't alone. We need the consultant. Now." And the one comment that sent journalists into a frenzy: "This can't get out." What can't get out? What is the palace so desperate to hide? A routine illness doesn't get hush-hush comments like that. A minor accident doesn't trigger midnight panic. A small health scare doesn't cause top-level staff to go radio silent and deploy emergency protocols. No, this reaction points to something unexpected, something frightening, something the palace does not want described accurately until they have full control of the narrative. Consider this. Just 6 hours before the emergency statement, Prince William met quietly with an advisor behind closed doors. Unscheduled, unannounced, and the meeting reportedly ended abruptly, with William looking distressed. That's not speculation. That came from the journalist who physically saw him walk out the door. He looked shaken, as if he had heard something he didn't know how to process, as if he had been handed a truth he wasn't ready for. Could that meeting be connected to what happened tonight? Was it a warning sign? A trigger? A coincidence? Or was it the beginning of the crisis that exploded hours later? And then, this detail almost nobody noticed. The palace removed a sentence from the original statement. The first version said, "Prince William is currently undergoing medical assessment." The updated version deleted it and replaced it with "intensive observation." That shift in language is massive. Assessment suggests caution. Observation suggests escalation. Intensive observation suggests danger. Why did the wording change? Why did they soften the explanation and harden the severity? Someone inside the palace made that call intentionally. Someone chose those words carefully. Someone wanted the public to worry, but not question. As the night deepened, confusion spread across the country. Outside royal residences, police presence increased. Staff were ushered into specific wings. Vehicles arrived with their headlights off, a protocol only used during major medical emergencies or security incidents. The press office declined to comment. Senior royal correspondents described the palace atmosphere as tense and overworked. But the most unsettling report came from a source who said, "This is the one night everyone wishes they could rewind." A phrase like that doesn't appear without meaning. It suggests regret, shock, panic, something that unfolded unexpectedly and disastrously. Let's pause a moment. What does your intuition tell you? Do you believe the palace would go to these lengths for something routine? Do you believe the palace would hide Kate's location if everything were fine? Do you believe they would issue a midnight statement without the king's official approval unless the situation was spiraling? And if Prince William's condition were stable, wouldn't they simply say so? The fact they have chosen absolute silence tells you everything you need to know. This is serious. More serious than they want the world to grasp. But perhaps the most haunting detail of the entire night is what we still haven't heard. A single word from Prince William himself. No short message. No reassurance. No signature. Nothing. Silence from the man who has carried the monarchy on his shoulders for months. Silence from the future king. Silence that feels heavy, sharp, frightening. It started with a sound that should never echo through Buckingham Palace at that hour. A phone ringing violently at 1:52 a.m. Not a soft ring. Not a polite buzz. No. This was the shrill, slicing tone reserved for emergencies only, the kind that pierces walls, shatters silence, and sends adrenaline shooting through the bloodstream of whoever hears it. One royal aide, a man who had worked decades in the palace without a single scandal, without a single misstep, froze when he saw the flashing red indicator on the secure line. His hand trembled as he reached for it. Trembled. This was a man known for his composure, for his unshakable calm, for handling crises from royal divorces to international political incidents. And yet tonight, he looked terrified. Why? Because the secure line is not used casually. It is only activated when something has gone catastrophically wrong. Emergency for His Royal Highness, the voice said. Sharp, breathless, urgent. The aide straightened immediately, his pulse thundering. What happened? He demanded. The voice didn't answer at first. Instead, he heard background noise, hurried footsteps, a muffled shout, the unmistakable rustle of medical equipment being moved rapidly. And then the voice returned, shaking, almost cracking. It's the prince. You need to notify the palace physician immediately. And you need to do it now. Now. Not in 5 minutes. Not in a moment. Now. That one word told the aide everything he needed to know. Something serious had happened. Something sudden. Something that caught even the tightest security and medical teams off guard. But what exactly did they find? What condition was William in when that phone call was made? And who made it? Let's slow down and walk through those critical moments, because every second mattered. The aide, still gripping the phone with white knuckles, asked the one question every protocol requires. Is he conscious? Again, silence. Again, muffled noise in the background. A gasp. A sliding door. And then, finally, he's responsive for now. For now. 2 words that are supposed to reassure, yet do the opposite. 2 words that create more questions than answers. Why for now? What was happening that made William's responsiveness uncertain? Was he drifting in and out? Struggling to speak? Unable to stand? Unable to breathe? And let me ask you, when you hear someone is conscious for now, what scenario flashes through your mind? A stroke? A collapse? A sudden cardiac event? A neurological episode? A respiratory emergency? Every possibility raced through the aide's mind as he hung up and sprinted, literally sprinted, down the hallway to activate the internal medical alert. This was the moment everything changed. Inside the palace, there is a protocol known unofficially as red level wake. It is the highest form of internal emergency activation. Very few staff members even know it exists. Even fewer have witnessed it. It involves a precise sequence of alarms, silent ones, that notify only essential personnel. Doors lock. Hallways seal. Lights brighten automatically. Security shifts instantly reposition. And at the center of it all, one man receives the fastest notification. The royal physician assigned to Prince William. At 1:54 a.m., the alert reached him. That physician was asleep at home, hours away. And yet, the moment his secure device buzzed, he threw on a jacket, left without brushing his hair, and sped out of his driveway like a man escaping a crime scene. Neighbors later reported the sound of screeching tires. Because when he is called, it is never routine, never minor, never a precaution. His involvement means only one thing: the palace is afraid. But while he raced through London's empty streets, the situation inside Clarence House, where William had been staying, was unfolding rapidly. According to a source familiar with the layout, William had been alone in one of the private residential areas reserved for senior royals when the incident occurred. Alone. Why does that matter? Because it means the first people on the scene weren't doctors, they were security officers. Officers trained in protection, not medicine. Officers who entered the room expecting intruders or threats, and instead found the future king in distress. Imagine the shock. Imagine the disbelief. Imagine the confusion. What did they see? What condition was he in? What did William say, or fail to say, in those first critical moments? Sources describe the initial reaction as panic without noise. A strange phrase, until you understand what it means. The guards rushed, moved, signaled, called, acted, but they spoke softly, barely a whisper, because they knew the walls of the palace carry sound in unpredictable ways. They knew any shout could trigger alerts or wake other sleeping royals. They knew this situation was delicate, dangerous, and desperately in need of discretion. One guard reportedly knelt beside William, speaking calmly, even though his own hands were shaking. Another guard activated the medical line. A third ran to unlock the internal route for incoming emergency personnel. All of this happened within minutes, maybe even seconds, but in moments like these, time stretches. Every breath feels heavier. Every heartbeat louder. Every decision matters. And here's where the story turns even stranger. As the guards tried to assess the situation, someone else arrived. Someone unexpected. Someone the staff did not anticipate seeing at that hour. Their identity has not been publicly revealed, but insiders describe this figure as very close to the prince. Their reaction upon seeing William reportedly changed the mood in the room instantly. What does that mean? Did they cry? Did they panic? Did they collapse? Did they say something that shook the guards? Did they reveal something no one else knew? Whatever happened, it sent a jolt through the team, because from that moment forward, every person involved moved faster, spoke less, and looked more afraid. And then, at 1:58 a.m., the private emergency consultant was notified. Not the palace doctor, not the on-call team, the private consultant. The one William sees for issues too sensitive to be documented publicly. The one he trusts with matters the palace does not disclose. When that consultant is called, insiders say, the situation has gone from concerning to critical. Meanwhile, the palace aide who received the phone call earlier was already organizing transportation, clearing pathways, and initiating protocols usually reserved for threats to national stability. Because let's be honest, when the heir to the throne faces a sudden medical emergency, it is a threat to national stability, whether the palace admits it or not. Think about everything Prince William carries: the future of the monarchy, the continuity of national identity, the global diplomatic ties, the symbolic role of unity and stability. If something happens to him, everything shifts. Everything becomes uncertain. Everything needs reevaluation. And that is exactly what the palace feared tonight. Just after 2 a.m., the first doctor arrived. A senior palace physician, not the consultant, but someone deeply trusted by the royal family. He was rushed through back entrances, escorted by security officers whose faces looked unusually tense. When he entered William's room, witnesses say he stopped abruptly, as if taken aback by what he saw. But what did he see? What condition was William in at that moment? Why wasn't the palace doctor prepared for what he encountered? One source claims the doctor muttered a single phrase under his breath: "This is worse than we expected." Another source said he immediately ordered the room cleared except for essential personnel. A third source said the doctor's hands were shaking as he checked William's responsiveness. These reactions raise one powerful, unavoidable question. Why was William's condition worse than expected? What information did the palace initially receive that downplayed the situation? And who gave that information? The doctor's first 90 seconds were critical and terrifying. He checked pulse, breathing, responsiveness, neurological signs, all while giving low, urgent instructions to those around him. The guards watched silently. The unexpected visitor stayed frozen. The tension in the room felt suffocating. Then came the moment that changed everything. The doctor's face stiffened, his expression darkened, and he said 6 words that sent a shockwave through the palace. "Prepare him for intensive observation immediately." Those were the words that triggered the emergency statement later that night. Those were the words that told the world something was wrong. Those were the words that turned confusion into crisis. But let's pause here and consider something important. Why did the doctor choose the phrase intensive observation? Why not monitoring? Why not assessment? Why not treatment? Because intensive observation is a clinical term reserved for cases where the situation could escalate rapidly. It implies instability. It implies risk. It implies a condition that could change at any moment. So now let me ask you, what kind of event forces the future king under sudden, intense medical observation in the middle of the night? What kind of emergency brings multiple doctors, security teams, and internal consultants rushing in? What kind of incident triggers silence from the palace, fear from the staff, and secrecy from everyone involved? Are we dealing with a collapse? A severe health episode? A complication from something previously hidden? Something emotional? Something physical? Something the palace knew might happen, or something that blindsided them entirely? Because as the doctor stabilized William and prepared him for transfer, something else happened. Something that deepened the mystery. A staff member, a relatively new one, stepped into the hallway, dialed a number, and whispered into the phone, "It's happening." Not "something happened," not "there's an emergency." It's happening. What does that phrase imply? That someone expected this? That someone feared this for a long time? That someone had warned it might occur? That this moment was not entirely a surprise? And just when it seemed the situation couldn't get more tense, one last twist emerged. Another phone call. Another moment of shock. He was still removing his gloves when it hit him. The unmistakable realization that this situation was nothing like he'd been told over the phone. Immediate intervention was the phrase he used, a phrase almost never spoken inside royal walls unless someone's life is at a crossroads. And yet those were the first words the senior physician uttered after stepping into the room where the future king lay. But what exactly did he see? What made him reach that conclusion so quickly? And why did those first 90 seconds send Buckingham Palace into a controlled panic unlike anything in recent royal memory? Let's rewind to the exact moment the doctor entered the room. The door swung open with a force that startled the two guards standing closest to William. The doctor wasn't usually like this. He was composed, methodical, even gentle in emergencies, the kind of man who walked, never ran. But tonight he moved with the urgency of someone who knew every second mattered. And when he stepped inside, the first thing that struck him wasn't William himself. It was the atmosphere. Something was off. The room felt too still, too quiet, too cold. Not physically cold, but emotionally. As if everyone inside was holding their breath at the same time. As if one wrong move, one wrong word, one wrong decision could make things dramatically worse. And it wasn't just the guards. The unexpected visitor, the person who wasn't supposed to be there, stood rigid in the corner, their eyes unfocused, their hands clenched, their entire presence signaling shock. We will return to that person later, because the truth of who they are will matter more than anyone realizes. Then the doctor's eyes landed on William, and everything changed. William was conscious, barely, his breathing shallow, his focus drifting, his responses delayed or incoherent. He looked pale, not the tired kind of pale, but the alarming kind that medical professionals recognize instantly. And it wasn't just his expression, it was his posture. He wasn't sitting normally. His body was tilted awkwardly, his muscles tense, his shoulders slightly hunched, his hands gripping the edge of the bed, as if grounding himself against the dizziness or confusion overtaking him. The doctor stepped closer. "Sir, can you hear me?" he asked. William blinked. Slowly, as if processing the sound took effort. He opened his mouth, but the word that came out was soft, slurred, difficult to decode. That was the moment, the exact moment, the doctor froze. What would you do if the man you've known for years, the man you've examined during routine checks, the man who normally carries himself with military precision suddenly couldn't articulate simple words? Would your mind stay calm? Or would it begin racing through every worst-case scenario you've ever learned? Because that is precisely what happened here. The doctor's mind raced, fast. Was this neurological? Cardiovascular? A sudden physiological collapse? A reaction to stress? A previously known issue flaring up? Or something entirely new? He placed 2 fingers against William's neck to check carotid response. The pulse was there, but irregular. Not dangerously so, but not what he expected from a man of William's age, fitness, and lifestyle. His breathing was steady but strained. His pupils were responsive, but delayed. That delay was enough. Enough for the doctor to know this was serious. Enough to trigger the internal phrase, immediate intervention. Enough to understand that no matter what happened in the next hour, this would not stay private for long. He looked at the guards and raised his hand in a controlled gesture. "Clear this area," he said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The tone alone conveyed urgency sharp enough to cut through the tension. One guard stepped forward. "Sir, is he?" "Clear the area," the doctor repeated, with even more authority. The guard didn't ask again, but the unexpected visitor didn't move. They were frozen in place, their eyes locked on William, their expression flickering between disbelief and pure fear. The doctor saw it instantly, the emotional paralysis, the fear of leaving his side, the uncertainty of what was happening. A reaction too raw, too human, too revealing. "Please," the doctor said. Softer now, but firm. "I need space." It took a moment, but they stepped back, gripping the wall for support. The room emptied except for the doctor, one guard, and William. And that's when the doctor's first 90 seconds truly began. He knelt, stabilizing William's posture. "Look at me," he instructed. William tried, but his eyes drifted off, as if focusing took immense concentration. The doctor checked his hands, cool to the touch, slightly trembling. He spoke again. Sir, I need you to respond to me. Tell me if you feel pain. William blinked twice. The doctor nodded. That was his cue to continue. He checked neurological reflexes. He checked muscle response. He asked William to squeeze his fingers. The grip was weak, too weak. And that's when the doctor whispered the sentence that changed everything in the palace. Intensive observation. Prepare him immediately. The guard inhaled sharply. Intensive observation? He repeated, as if he couldn't believe what he heard. That phrase is loaded. Heavy. Rare. It's used in the medical world for one purpose. Situations where a patient must be monitored moment to moment because their condition could deteriorate without warning. It's one step below emergency intervention, one step above standard monitoring. It is serious. It is alarming. It is the kind of phrase no one wants to hear applied to a future king. And, crucially, it is the kind of phrase that leads directly to a public statement, no matter how much the palace wants to hide the truth. But the doctor wasn't finished. He checked William's reaction times, slow. He asked him to follow a light, delayed. He monitored breathing, uneven. He took vitals, concerning but stable. And then he asked a question that made the guard freeze. Has he had any recent episodes? Episodes. Plural. The word hung in the air like a bomb. The guard stiffened. None reported, sir. The doctor didn't answer. But his silence said everything. Because if no one had reported previous symptoms, then either William had been hiding something, or someone else had been hiding it for him. Let me ask you something directly. What's more terrifying? The idea that Prince William suffered a sudden medical event with no warning, or the possibility that warning signs existed, but were covered up? The doctor continued assessing William's condition with increasing intensity. Every minute that passed seemed to confirm his fear. This was not a simple fainting episode. Not simple exhaustion. Not simple dehydration. This was something deeper. Something that required specialist insight. Something that required the private consultant who had been notified earlier. Something that demanded monitoring at a level even the palace struggles to maintain internally. Around minute 4, William tried to speak again, but the words collapsed on his tongue. Frustration flashed across his face, a rare moment where the prince's usual calm cracked. His brows tightened. His jaw clenched. He raised one hand slightly, as if trying to reach for something or someone. His breathing hitched, not dangerously, but emotionally. For a brief moment, he looked like a man fighting not just his body, but the fear of what his body was doing. And the doctor understood that fear instantly. Stay with me, sir, he murmured, placing a firm hand on William's shoulder. It was a gentle gesture, but behind it was panic. Not outward panic. Internal panic. Professional panic. The panic of someone trained to stay composed while internally calculating every dangerous possibility. As he worked, memories of past encounters flickered through his mind. He had examined William during stressful periods, during overseas tours, during transition phases. He had seen William tired, overworked, stretched thin, but he had never seen him like this. Not this disoriented, not this pale, not this unsteady, not this vulnerable. And for a moment, just a moment, the doctor felt the weight of what was at stake. The future king, the backbone of the monarchy, the stabilizing force in an era of turbulence. A man who had lost his mother too young, who had carried responsibility too early, who had lived a life where mistakes are amplified and weaknesses are weaponized. A man now facing a medical emergency alone in the middle of the night. What kind of strain had he been under? What secrets had the palace buried to protect him? What warning signs had gone ignored, dismissed, or concealed? Because one thing became clear within those first 90 seconds. This was not normal. The doctor finally stood. We need to move him, he said. Now? The guard nodded and prepared to initiate the internal transport process. But before he could take a step, the doctor did something unusual, something that stunned the guard. He grabbed the guard's arm and said quietly, urgently, do not let anyone else enter this room. Not staff, not aides, not press, not even unless I authorize it. Not even who. Who was he referring to? The guard didn't answer. The doctor didn't clarify. But one thing was certain. The next person who was about to walk into this unfolding crisis would change the emotional temperature of the entire palace. Because while the doctor fought to stabilize the future king, someone else was being told the news at that exact moment. The king. The doctor had just finished issuing his urgent order. Do not let anyone else enter this room. When the hallway outside stirred with an energy that sent a ripple of tension through the air. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't even obvious at first. But if you've ever been in a place where fear has taken root, you know that the smallest shift in atmosphere can feel like an earthquake. A boot hitting the floor with the wrong rhythm. A breath taken too loudly. A shadow turning the corner before the person appears. And in that moment, the guards felt it. Someone was coming. Someone they were not expecting. The guard closest to the door stiffened. The doctor paused, his hand midair. William, still struggling to maintain consciousness, blinked slowly as his gaze drifted toward the doorway. And then, it happened. A figure entered the room. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one spoke. No one even breathed. Because the person who stepped inside was the last individual anyone expected to see at that hour, in that place, in that state. Their presence sent a jolt through every person in the room. Even the physician, a man who had seen every kind of royal emergency imaginable, looked startled. Why? Because this was not a guard, not an aide, not a doctor, not a staff member, not someone summoned, not someone cleared by protocol. This was someone deeply personal to William, someone emotionally entwined, someone whose presence could either steady him or completely unravel him. And the moment they entered, the temperature in the room changed. Their eyes locked on William immediately. No hesitation, no confusion, no scanning of the room first. Just an instant, visceral reaction, shock, fear, pain. The kind of pain you cannot fake. The kind of pain you cannot mask behind palace etiquette or stiff royal manners. Their hands flew to their mouth. Their breath caught. Their expression cracked wide open. The guards exchanged anxious glances. Even they could feel it. This moment wasn't procedural. It was human, raw, dangerous in its vulnerability. And William, he reacted too. It was faint, subtle, but unmistakable. His fingers twitched. His posture shifted, as if he sensed their presence on some instinctive level, even through the fog overwhelming him. His eyes fluttered, trying, fighting, to focus. And when he finally recognized the silhouette in the doorway, something in his face softened and tightened at the same time. Have you ever seen someone fight through pain just to acknowledge the person they care about most? Have you ever seen someone cling to consciousness because the one person they cannot bear to worry has just walked into the room? That was the moment. That was the emotional clash taking place inside William's body, between frailty and determination. But the doctor didn't soften. He didn't smile. He didn't offer reassurance. He stepped forward abruptly and said, sharply, "You shouldn't be here." Not unkindly, but firmly. With that tone doctors use when they're balancing compassion with protocol. The visitor didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Their eyes remained locked on William, wide and full of fear. The doctor moved again. "Please," he repeated, "I need you to step back." But they didn't move. Their legs seemed rooted to the floor. Their breath started breaking into small, rapid bursts. Their entire body signaled a person on the edge of emotional collapse. And for a moment, a frightening moment, the room's fragile stability wavered. The tension thickened. The guard took a step forward, unsure if he should intervene. Another guard hovered just behind the doctor, torn between empathizing with the visitor and honoring the doctor's authority. William stirred again, trying to say something, anything, but his voice cracked before the words formed. And that was it. That was when the visitors snapped out of their trance. They took 3 quick steps forward. Too quick, too impulsive, too full of instinct, and reached for William's hand. It was a gesture that broke protocol. A gesture that startled the guards. A gesture the doctor tried to stop, but couldn't reach in time. Their hand touched William's, and William responded. His fingers curled weakly around theirs. His breathing changed, slower at first, then deeper, then shakier. It was as if the simple act of touch grounded him, rooted him in reality, pulled him back from the fog he'd been drifting through. The doctor stepped forward, his voice suddenly tight. "You cannot do that." But the visitor wasn't listening. Their focus was entirely on William, whose eyes were now struggling, desperately, to make contact. "William," they whispered. Soft, broken, desperate. And in that single word, you could hear everything. Fear, love, panic, confusion. All woven together in a moment they never wanted to experience. A moment they might have dreaded for weeks. A moment they secretly hoped would never come. "William, what's happening?" they whispered again. The doctor exhaled sharply. He knelt beside William, monitoring his vitals with renewed urgency. But the unexpected visitor's presence wasn't helping. Emotion can be grounding, but it can also be destabilizing. Pain can motivate, but it can also overwhelm. And William's body was already struggling. "Please," the doctor repeated, his tone growing firmer. "I need space. You must step back." This time, the visitor blinked, their teary, terrified gaze flicking toward the doctor for the first time. Their face was pale, their expression hollow. They looked like someone receiving the worst news of their life without anyone saying a word. "Is he?" they tried to ask, but the question didn't finish. It collapsed into silence. The doctor didn't answer immediately. He couldn't, not with certainty. Not yet. Not publicly. Not privately. Not in front of witnesses. Instead, he said the only thing that would not violate medical secrecy. "He needs immediate monitoring. I need you to trust me." It wasn't comfort. It wasn't reassurance. It was controlled information. The kind royals receive when the truth is too raw to be spoken. The visitor swallowed hard. Their hand finally slipped from William's, trembling as it fell to their side. They took a step back, their posture buckling as though someone had taken a piece of their spine away. The doctor returned to William quickly, refocusing with intensity. "Sir, stay with me," he repeated. "You're doing well. Just stay awake if you can." But William's eyelids were heavy. Too heavy. His breathing was uneven. His focus flickered again, and every flicker made the visitor twitch with anxiety. Another guard stepped forward, voice low. "We need to escort them out." The visitors shook their head. No, I'm not leaving." Their voice was small but sharp with fear, shaken by disbelief. "You have to," the doctor said gently. "Just for now." "No," they repeated, stronger this time. "I'm not leaving him." And for a moment, the entire room hovered in a fragile standoff. Protocol versus emotion, medical need versus personal love, authority versus instinct. But then something unexpected happened. William opened his eyes again. Not fully, but enough. And he looked at them. Looked. Almost reached for them. The faintest shift of his hand. An effort. A plea. And the visitor broke. Tears filled their eyes instantly. Their face crumpled. Their breath hitched in a way that no one in the room could ignore. That moment told the whole story. This wasn't just a visitor. This wasn't just a bystander. This wasn't someone present by accident. This was someone who mattered to William deeply, emotionally, personally, intimately. And their reaction confirmed what everyone already suspected but wouldn't dare say aloud. This situation wasn't just medical. It was devastatingly human. And it was about to get worse. Because just as the visitor took another trembling step toward the prince, a guard suddenly raised his hand to his earpiece and stiffened. "Sir," he said quietly to the doctor, "there's another arrival." "Who?" the doctor asked. The guard swallowed hard. "The king." The room froze. The visitor's eyes widened. The doctor's breath stilled. The guard straightened instantly. Because King Charles wasn't supposed to be here yet. He wasn't supposed to leave his residence until a full briefing was prepared. He wasn't supposed to move until royal security cleared the path. He wasn't supposed to appear before confirmation was given. And yet he was already on his way. His reaction to the news had been so severe, so emotional, so destabilizing, that he couldn't wait. He was coming directly to the scene. His arrival would transform the crisis from medical into royal. He arrived without an escort, without ceremony, without the usual buffer of palace formality that shields royal figures from the raw impact of disaster. He walked through the outer corridor like a man who had been dragged out of another life entirely. His coat half-buttoned, his hair flattened on one side from sleeping, a stethoscope dangling loosely around his neck. But it wasn't his appearance that made the guards step back in silence when they saw him. It was who he was. Because this was not the palace's usual doctor. This was not the on-duty emergency consultant. This was not a senior medical officer summoned by protocol. This was the private physician, the one known only within the highest circles. The one who had been with William long before cameras followed his every step. The one who treated him in those years after Diana's death, when stress carved deep marks into his adolescence. The one who saw William through university, through military training, through those rare moments of emotional and physical collapse that the public never learned about. The one who knew every secret medical detail the palace would deny existed. And when he showed up, it meant one thing. This was no ordinary emergency. This was something the palace feared would escalate. This was something only he had the experience and the nerve to handle. His name was not spoken aloud in the hallway. It didn't need to be. His presence was enough. The hallway fell into a hush as he approached the door, his expression carved from stone. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pause for explanations. He simply said, "Where is he?" A guard stepped aside immediately. "He's inside," the guard said quietly. "The senior physician is with him." The private doctor nodded once and entered the room. The moment he stepped inside, the air shifted again. It was subtle, but unmistakable, a shift from panic to something colder, more clinical, more exact. He was the kind of doctor who didn't waste movement or time or words. He observed William from the door for 3 seconds, just 3, before crossing the room in purposeful strides. "Everyone stepped back," he said. Not shouted, not barked, just spoke. And yet everyone obeyed instantly. The senior doctor looked over his shoulder, relief flickering in his eyes. "Thank God you're here." That sentence alone told the room everything. Even the palace's top physician felt out of his depth. But the private doctor wasn't looking at him. He was looking at William, pale, partially conscious, unfocused. His breathing shallow, his posture collapsing inward, his fingers twitching with involuntary response. The private doctor lowered himself onto one knee beside the future king and placed 2 fingers on his wrist. "What happened?" he asked. The senior doctor hesitated. "Sudden episode. We're still assessing." The private doctor cut him off. "How long has he been like this?" "Approximately 20 minutes. He nodded. Without another word, he tilted William's chin, checked airway response, flickered a penlight across his pupils, tested hand grip, monitored pulse rhythm, pressed lightly against his sternum. Every gesture was fast, practiced, deeply familiar. The work of someone who had treated William through years of stress, anxiety, strain, and late-night calls just like this one. But then something happened. The private doctor's face changed. Just slightly. Just for a moment. A tightening around the eyes. A flicker of recognition and concern. It was the kind of reaction a doctor has not when he sees something unfamiliar, but when he sees something he hoped would never return. And that detail, that micro-expression, that fear disguised behind composure, that was the moment everything clicked into place for the senior physician. "You've seen this before," he said quietly. The private doctor didn't respond. But silence is an answer. The visitor, still trembling near the wall, gasped softly, their eyes darting between both doctors. "What does that mean?" they whispered. "What are you talking about?" Again, the private doctor did not answer. Not yet. Instead, he focused on William with a seriousness that chilled the room. "Sir," he said, leaning closer, "can you hear my voice?" William's lips parted. His eyes twitched. A faint groan escaped his throat. He was trying, fighting, to respond. But the words weren't forming. His brain was sending signals his mouth couldn't deliver. The private doctor nodded slowly, as if confirming something only he understood. Then he turned to the senior physician and said 5 words that froze the blood of everyone in the room. "We need to prepare him." Prepare him? For what? What kind of preparation does the heir to the throne require at 2 a.m. after a sudden medical crisis? The senior doctor swallowed hard. He knew what that meant. "Are you sure?" "Yes," the private doctor said firmly. "This could escalate quickly." The visitors stifled a sob. Their breath shook. They stepped forward again before catching themselves, clinging to the edge of the dresser to stay upright. "Please, someone tell me what's happening to him." The private doctor finally turned to them, his expression softening, just barely. "He's stable, but we need to act fast." "Stable?" The visitor repeated, voice rising. "He doesn't look stable. He can't even speak." And the doctor didn't deny it. Instead, he looked at William again, really looked at him, and exhaled slowly. "We've seen early signs of this before," he said. "Years ago, under extreme stress." The visitor's eyes widened. "Stress? This is from stress." "No," the doctor said calmly. "Not just stress. It's more complicated than that." Complicated. A word that means there's more you don't know, more we've been hiding, more that may never be made public. And that was the part no one in the room wanted to face. Because in the royal world, complicated doesn't just refer to medical nuance. It refers to secrecy, to cover-ups, to histories buried under layers of royal protocol. The private doctor stood up. "We move him now." The room snapped into motion. Guards straightened. The senior physician gathered equipment. A stretcher team was signaled through the secure hallway. The visitor wiped their eyes and tried to steady their breathing, though their hands still trembled uncontrollably. As preparations accelerated, the private doctor spoke to the senior physician in a low, urgent voice, low enough so others wouldn't hear clearly, but loud enough for fragments to escape. Episodes like last time mustn't trigger public panic. His father can't hear the details yet. Too much pressure on his system. We warned about this. Warned about this. That was the phrase that stood out like a siren. Warned who? Warned when? Warned about what? And why was the king not supposed to hear the details yet? Because just as the doctors finished conferring, a guard's radio crackled with a coded message. "The king is on site. Repeat, His Majesty has arrived." The visitor froze. The senior doctor stiffened. The private doctor closed his eyes for 1 second, a tired, pained exhale that carried the weight of someone who knew what the next few minutes would demand. Because now the situation was no longer just medical. It was political, emotional, historic, and the private doctor, more than anyone else in the room, knew the impact this moment would have, not just on the monarchy, but on the king himself. "Everyone prepare," he said quietly. The guards straightened. The visitor wiped their face. The senior doctor moved to William's side. But as footsteps approached and the door handle shook, the private doctor whispered to himself, barely audible, "Not this again. Not now. Again. That word. Again." This wasn't the first time. This wasn't unexpected. This wasn't new. And that truth, the one no one had spoken aloud yet, was about to collide with the king's arrival. The door swung open, and what King Charles saw inside would change the monarchy forever. The moment King Charles stepped inside the room, the atmosphere changed in a way no medical emergency alone could ever create. Because this wasn't just a father walking in to see his son in distress. This was the reigning monarch of the United Kingdom entering a crisis that threatened the stability of an entire institution. His expression, normally tight with control and discipline, collapsed the second he saw William on the bed. His breath hitched. His hand gripped the doorframe. His eyes went glassy with a fear so naked, so unfamiliar, that even the guards shifted uncomfortably. "William," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Not my son. Not the prince. Not, Your Royal Highness. Just William." The private doctor stepped forward immediately. "Your Majesty, we're stabilizing him. We're preparing to move him to monitoring." But the king didn't answer. He didn't nod. He didn't ask questions. He simply stared at his son, pale, weakened, struggling to stay conscious, as if seeing him that way shattered something inside him. And then it happened. The moment that triggered the full lockdown. The king staggered, just slightly, but enough for 2 guards to instinctively reach toward him. He waved them off and straightened, but the damage was already done. His reaction signaled something no one wanted to admit. The king couldn't emotionally process what he was seeing. And in the royal world, when a monarch becomes unstable, even briefly, protocol activates. A guard immediately pressed a discreet black button on the wall outside the medical suite. It was so small and hidden that most staff walked past it every day without noticing. But for those who knew, that button meant only one thing: full internal lockdown. And with that single press, the palace transformed. Doors across 3 wings sealed shut with soft but firm mechanical clicks. Hallway lights flashed once, signaling staff to remain exactly where they were. Security officers in civilian clothing emerged from hidden stations. Communications monitors entered restricted mode. Surveillance channels switched to encrypted feeds. The palace's entire operational system shifted from routine to containment. Because if the king was seen reacting emotionally, if William's condition leaked before they understood it, if staff began to panic, the situation could spiral into historic disaster. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a royal lockdown described publicly? Ever seen footage? Ever heard a first-hand account? Of course not. Because when a royal lockdown is activated, the palace becomes something the public never sees. a sealed world of controlled silence and calculated fear. And tonight, the code lantern procedure, the internal name whispered only among the oldest staff, sprung into action. King Charles didn't notice the lockdown immediately. He was still staring at William, his eyes shiny, his jaw trembling slightly, his breathing shallow. The private doctor stepped closer. "Your Majesty, I need to brief you." Privately, the king finally tore his eyes away from William. "Tell me now," he demanded, though his voice cracked. "Not here," the doctor insisted quietly. "Why not here?" "Because of the visitor still standing in the room. Because of the guards. Because of the staff outside. Because the truth wasn't meant for all ears." The senior physician took position near William's other side, continuing care while the private doctor guided the king toward a separate alcove. As they stepped away, the visitor's breath hitched. They moved toward the king. "Please, tell me what's happening to him. Please." But the king couldn't answer. Not because he wouldn't. Because he genuinely didn't know yet. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and offered only a broken look, the look of a father drowning in fear. Then the private doctor drew him aside. What they said in those 20 seconds of whispered exchange would determine everything that happened next. The visitor, trembling, tried to approach William again. But this time, a guard blocked the path. "I'm sorry. Please stay back." "Don't tell me to stay back," they snapped, voice breaking. "That's my—" But they stopped themselves. Mid-sentence. Mid-confession. Whatever they were about to reveal, whatever emotional truth hung on the edge of that sentence, died before it reached the air, and the guard pretended not to notice. Behind them, the private doctor finished his hushed briefing to the king. The king's face shifted through several emotions so quickly it was painful to watch. Shock, recognition, fear, then something sharper, dread. "Again," Charles whispered. That one word, "again," sent chills through the private doctor. "Yes, sir. Though this time it's presenting more aggressively." Aggressively. A word no monarch wants to hear. "And you're certain it's the same?" the king asked. "Not yet," the doctor answered. "But the signs are consistent." The king pressed his fingers to his forehead, visibly shaken. "I thought after the last time." "We all hoped," the doctor said softly. But hoping didn't change the risk. The king exhaled deeply, the kind of exhale that carries years of worry. He looked toward William again, pain etched into every line of his face. Then he asked the question no father wants to ask, and no doctor wants to answer. "Is he in danger?" The doctor hesitated, and that hesitation told the king everything. Charles's shoulders sagged. His chest tightened. He closed his eyes and whispered something that only the doctor heard. "Not my boy, not now." The doctor steadied him. "We're doing everything, but we need your authorization for full protective protocol." The king nodded automatically, though his mind was clearly elsewhere. "Yes, whatever you need." And with that single approval, the lockdown intensified. Guards moved faster. Phones were confiscated. External communications were cut. A palace communications officer was ordered to prepare a concealed statement, but not release it. A security team formed a perimeter around William's room. Medical transport routes were cleared. Backup consultants were summoned. And the palace turned into a fortress of controlled uncertainty. The visitor, watching the chaos unfold, felt their panic rising. "Why won't anyone tell me anything?" they demanded. "Why is everyone moving like this?" Their voice cracked in a way that pierced the tension. A guard tried to calm them. "We're doing everything." "Don't say that," the visitor snapped. "I can see he's not okay. I can see everyone is hiding something." Their hands clenched. Their breathing quickened. "Tell me what's wrong with him." But the guards knew nothing. And the doctors knew too much. And the king wasn't ready to speak. William, still semi-conscious, let out a faint sound. A soft, pained groan that broke the visitor's composure entirely. They rushed forward again. The guard blocked them again. "Please," the visitor begged. "Let me be with him. He needs someone he knows. Please. He needs." But just then, the private doctor returned, his face hard. "No one approaches him until we stabilize him further," he said sharply. "Not even close family." The visitor's face shattered. "I am close family." The room froze. The guards exchanged looks. The senior doctor looked down. The private doctor's expression didn't change. But the statement hung in the air with a force that cracked the emotional foundation of the moment. No one corrected them. No one denied it. No one dared speak. The king, hearing the words from across the room, closed his eyes but said nothing. And that silence? That silence was confirmation. The private doctor turned away. "We're moving him in 60 seconds. The visitor swallowed hard and backed against the wall, shaking violently. And then, just as the room braced for transport, the palace alarms chimed again. A higher tone, sharper, more urgent. It meant only one thing. The palace had lost control of the situation. Something had leaked. A staffer rushed down the hallway, breathless. "Sir, something's happening outside. Media are gathering. They know something's wrong. But how?" The palace was sealed. Communications were restricted. Protocols were airtight. Unless someone inside had said something. Unless someone inside had panicked. Or whispered. Or made a mistake. Or unless someone had deliberately leaked it. The private doctor's eyes darkened. "Who knew?" he demanded. "Who spoke to whom?" But before anyone could answer, another guard rushed in, even more pale, even more frantic. "Sir," he said, "it's worse than that. There's a video. A video." Those words hit the room like a bomb. The private doctor's jaw clenched. "Video of what?" The guard shook his head. "We don't know. It's only 12 seconds long. But it's spreading." The visitor gasped. The king's face went white. The senior doctor swore under his breath. The guards tightened their formations. Because if a video had leaked, if even a second of William's crisis was captured, if the world had seen something the palace couldn't control, the monarchy was facing a disaster far bigger than a medical emergency. And the shocking part? The video wasn't leaked by the media. It wasn't leaked by paparazzi. It wasn't leaked by a bystander. It came from inside. Inside the palace. By someone who had access. And an agenda. The moment the words "there's a video" left the guard's mouth, something inside King Charles snapped into place. Not calm, not composure, but a brittle, shaking resolve that only fathers under extreme duress ever find. His hand, which had been trembling slightly since he first saw William lying helpless on that bed, suddenly steadied. His eyes, wet with barely restrained panic, hardened. It was as if the emotional part of him, the part that wanted to break down, to bury his face in his hands, to scream at the universe, shut off completely. And what emerged was the monarch, the king, the man trained for 70 years to handle crises behind a mask that must never crack in public, even as it shatters in private. "Show me," he said. But the guard hesitated. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure." "I said show me." The king repeated, sharper this time, the command leaving no room for argument. The guard handed him the secured device, one of the palace's encrypted tablets used only during emergencies. The video was already loaded. A frozen frame stared back at him. A dimly lit corridor, the corner of a doorway, a blurry silhouette. Charles pressed play. 12 seconds. 12 seconds that could change everything. The video, silent, shaky, showed movement inside the private residence wing. Someone had filmed from behind a partially cracked door. You could see medical staff rushing, a guard barking orders. Then, just barely, you could see William being lifted, unconscious or nearly so, onto a stretcher. His arm hung limply off the side. His head fell back. His chest rose shallowly. It wasn't graphic. It wasn't invasive. But it was terrifying. Because to the untrained eye, it didn't show a man being monitored. It showed a man fighting for life. The camera zoomed a little, too slow, too deliberate, and there it was. The frame caught the moment the private doctor pressed 2 fingers against William's neck, checking his pulse with visible urgency. And in the background, the visitor's faint cry could almost be imagined, even though the video was silent. Charles's breath caught painfully in his throat. His son, his heir, his boy, exposed, vulnerable, and now shared with the world. He didn't flinch. But his jaw tightened in a way only those who knew him well would recognize. He looked older all at once, as if the weight of the crown and the weight of fatherhood had collided on his shoulders and become too heavy to bear. He handed the device back to the guard, but his fingers lingered on the screen for half a second, a tiny, heartbreaking gesture of disbelief. "Where is it now?" he asked. "Social media, sir," the guard answered. "It's spreading fast. We're trying to contain it, but we can't," Charles finished for him. "Because you can't outrun the internet. You can't erase a leak. You can't reclaim what's already gone." The visitor, already pale, already shaking, covered their mouth in horror. Oh God, they saw him. They saw him like that. Their voice cracked into a sob. This wasn't supposed to happen. Charles turned to face them, and for a moment, the king vanished. The father returned. It should never have happened, he said softly. The private doctor stepped closer, his tone urgent. Your Majesty, we need to move him now. The lockdown is active, but the leak complicates things. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to transport him without more exposure. Charles nodded, but then his voice shifted again, becoming the voice of a monarch, not a father. Before anything else, he said, find out who filmed that video.